Hi guys, how's it going? It's Dr. Weaver, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to be reviewing pedigrees. And I'm also going to be showing you how you could use pedigrees to determine what kind of inheritance you may be looking at. Okay, so what's going to happen is a pedigree is going to show generation after generation after generation, and each line is going to be a different generation. And a square basically is going to represent the males, and a circle is going to represent the females. Whenever they get together or mate or whatever you want to call it, there's going to have a line that's going to connect them. And then underneath, it's going to show, just follow the line, their offspring. So in this case, this couple had a boy, a girl, another boy, and a boy. So this shows all of their offspring, and you can trace it through. Whenever it's colored, that's going to show a specific trait, like a phenotype that you're observing, and it's showing the trait of whatever is the pedigree is talking about. So this is a case of an autosomal recessive trait. Now, an autosome, just to back up and make sure you guys know what that means, it means a chromosome that's not a sex chromosome. So there's two types of chromosomes. There's autosomes and there's sex chromosomes. An autosome is just simply a normal chromosome that's not a sex chromosome. So in the case of an autosomal recessive trait, recessive means you need two copies to show it. And what's going to happen is the reason why they call it recessive is you can see that this one right here has a dominant and a recessive. So it does not show the recessive, it only shows the dominant. So in order to show the trait, this is going to be autosomal recessive. Two little copies. This is what is first learned about in biology. So what's going to happen is Mendel's pea plants and a lot of the initial examples when you learn about genetics, these are examples of autosomal recessive traits. Now, if you didn't have these letters, how would you recognize it? You would recognize it because you see approximately, there is no preference for male or female, so it's approximately the same. And you see that you have an affected individual that shows the phenotype, but you don't necessarily have to have one of the parents show the phenotype. So in this case, one of the parents does show the phenotype. And in this case right here, this male right here does have a parent with a phenotype, but over here, it doesn't necessarily have to show the phenotype in the parent. And that's because of the nature of the recessive trait. It gets masked by the dominant. So it can appear to skip generations. Okay. So similar to an autosomal recessive trait is an autosomal dominant trait. So it's going to be using the capital and lowercase letters to follow it. But with the case of the dominant trait is it is going to show the trait when there's at least one dominant trait. So in that case, that every parent of a child that shows the trait has to have at least one of the parents have to show the trait. So this female right here, its dad shows the trait. And this dad's parents, the dad shows the trait. And you can look right here. These children right here, their mom shows the trait. And this mom right here, the dad shows a trait. So in every single case for autosomal dominant, you always look, does an affected individual that shows a particular phenotype have at least one parent that shows the trait, as opposed to recessive, which doesn't necessarily have to have one of the parents show the trait. So there's the difference. Okay, moving on. X-linked traits are inherited on the X chromosome. And just to review, females are going to have the two X chromosomes. Male are going to have the X and the Y. Now, if you have a dominant and recessive situation with a female, you could have one dominant and one recessive allele. Alleles are versions of a gene. And what's going to happen is that it shows the dominant. For a female, it's rare. You need two recessive phenotypes to show. That's why if you look right here, you only see it in the males. With the males, all you need is one copy of the recessive gene for it to show, because there is no other X chromosome. The Y chromosome actually has completely different genes than the X chromosome. So it's completely different genes that do not have the ability to mask or cover up the recessive gene. That's why you're going to see it mostly appear in males. So whenever you face with a pedigree and you see it in mostly males, if not all the males, but it doesn't necessarily have to happen, because just like autosomal recessive, It doesn't necessarily have to have one of the parents show it because, for example, the female could be a carrier, okay, like so. Uh, it is X-linked. So X-linked recessive, look for mostly males, and for the recessive, you're going to look for it may, in fact, have parents that don't show the trait. Okay, so similar to X-linked recessive is Y-linked traits. Now, when I say similar, not similar in nature of how it's inherited, but similar in what the pedigree looks like. The way that you can look at Y-linked traits being inherited in males is every single parent, male parent, has to pass it on. So what's going to happen is if you have a trait, this has the trait, it passes on to all the males. And if a male has the trait, it passes it on to the male. Look over here. If the male doesn't have the trait, its sons do not have the trait. And likewise right here. So you could always trace the lineage. Father to son have to look the same. Y chromosomes are passed on from male to male. There's no other way. Okay. Lastly, this is my favorite. This is mitochondrial DNA. Mitochondrial DNA inheritance, abbreviated MT for mitochondrial traits. These are going to be inherited from the mother to all of her offspring. So what's going to happen is here's mom. She has a boy, a girl, a boy, and a boy, 5 children, and they all have the same exact mitochondrial DNA. Now, what's going to happen is this boy right here, this male, never reproduced, so we won't look at that. This mother had this daughter, and this daughter, when she reproduced, all of her offspring shared the maternal lineage. And right here, the mother gets to pass it down. But look at this male right here, doesn't get to pass it down. So the way to identify mitochondrial DNA is to see that it is inherited from the maternal lineage. So the mother gives it to all the brothers and the sisters, and then the mother gives it to all of her offspring, brothers and sisters. Now, why is this so? Well, here's a sperm cell, and here's an egg cell. And what happens is in the egg cell, we have the mitochondria. And I drew it nice and large. This way we can look at it. But tucked away in the tail of the sperm is the mitochondria. It's not in the head of the sperm, okay? It is not near the nucleus. So here's the nucleus of the egg. So what happens is during fertilization, here comes the sperm, and we have fertilization. Fertilization happens when the nucleus from the sperm goes inside the egg and it restores the normal number of chromosomes. Okay, the mitochondria most of the time is left in the tail. Okay, and that is why you could safely assume that when we look at these pedigrees, that the maternal lineage is going to be from the mitochondrial DNA because only the mitochondria from the mother's egg gets passed on. All right, guys, so I hope that helps in your review for pedigrees.